Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Kuf Chav Dalit is a fairly long and complex Daf. It's got two Mishnayos, so it has three basic categories of discussion, all about Halachos Muktzah. The first one discusses the development of the Gzeira, the decree answering certain types of kelim, making them Muktzah, even though they're useful objects. Then when the first Mishnah is on a similar subject, discussing the halachas of Kli Shemalachtai L'Isr and Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter, which we will discuss. And then the third Mishnah takes us into the subject of kelim which have broken, and when they retain the status of being useful, and when they lose it and become muktzah. So first of all, let's remind ourselves how muktzah developed. Muktzah originally meant that something was useless, and therefore you couldn't touch it or use it or move it on Shabbos because it is useless. At some point, there was a level of decrees added on useful objects, and at some point it was removed, and we're left with halachos on kelim which are useful, and their primary stated purpose is for something which is permitted to do on Shabbos. That's what we call Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter. And then there are kelim, useful objects, whose primary stated purpose is for something which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. That's called Kli Shemalachtai L'Isr. And of course the question is not if you're allowed to do those things on Shabbos, but are you allowed to use those kelim for other purposes on Shabbos? The first discussion we have on the daf is concerning four objects, which the Gemara has Mishnayos that says that these are muktzah. And the Gemara wants to say that they were only muktzah back before there was a relaxation of the halachos of muktzah on useful objects. When the first decree happened, most objects, even though they're Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter, were considered to be muktzah. The Gemara wants to say that nowadays that the rules were restricted, these objects aren't muktzah anymore, and the Gemara is going to try to show that it's not true, that each one has a reason why it's muktzah, even though it's a Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter. So first of all, what are the four objects? So they are the rods which are used to separate the lechem hapanim one from the other. It's the sticks that people put from one shoulder to another, from one person's shoulder to another's, with hooks hanging from them in order to suspend an animal in the air so that you could skin it. It is a peg which you can move from one door to another. It was used to lock the door, and it's a grinder. So all these things we have Mishayos which say that they are muktzah, and the Gemara wants to know why should they be muktzah. They're all Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter. The Gemara wanted to say because it must be that these Mishnayos are referring to before the rules were relaxed and we allowed Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter to be used for useful things. Now the Gemara wants to say no, each one has a reason why it is muktzah itself. Number one is because as far as the lechem hapanim, the point of these rods were to separate the breads from each other so that they should not become moldy, at least al pi derech hateva, they shouldn't become moldy. And the Gemara says that you didn't need them over Shabbos. In the short time that it took for Shabbos, they would not become moldy, and therefore it wasn't necessary, and therefore they are muktzah. As far as the rods which you stretch from my shoulder to your shoulder and we hook the animal from, the Gemara says this is like the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, who said you didn't need the rods, you could just stretch my arm to your shoulder and we can hang the animal from there. And as far as the pegs which are used to lock the door, so about that, the Mishnah had a machlok is whether or not you're allowed to move them. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you have to kick them from doorway to doorway to use it from being a lock in one door to being a lock in another door. According to Rabbi Tarfon, you're allowed to actually carry it. So the Gemara wants to say this has nothing to do with halachas muktzah at all. This is about the halach of carrying in a chatzor without an erev chatzeros. The rule is as follows: you're not allowed to carry from a house to a chatzor, or from a chatzor to a house without an erev chatzeros. But within the chatzor itself, you are allowed to, because you're not moving from one rishus to another, even if there is no erev chatzeros. So this peg was shifted from doorway to doorway, it's moving around in a chutzner. So the problem here is as follows: when I take the peg out of the doorway, is that considered to be moving from the house into the chutzner, or is that already considered in the chutzner and just moving it within the chutzner? So according to Rav Tarfon, it's considered within the chutzner. The doorway itself is considered within the chutzner, and therefore you're allowed to move it. It's not a problem of carrying within an area of chutzneres. You don't have to kick the peg. According to Rabbi Yeshua, however, you have to kick the peg because when it's in the doorway, it's considered to be inside the house, and therefore to move it into the chutzner, you would have to have an erev chatzeros, and if you don't, you would have to kick the thing. And then the last thing is the grinder. The Gemara says this is Reb Nechemi's opinion, who holds that you're not allowed to use a Kli Shemalachtai L'Heter for anything else, and therefore this is forbidden. We now begin the next Mishnah, which introduces a relatively simple sounding machlokas, but then when the Amoraim explain it, it becomes far more complex because a number of factors are introduced. So the machlokas that the Mishnah brings is as follows: between the Tanakama and Rabbi Nechemia, the machlokes says, are you allowed to move a kli shaloi l'tzarech? Are you allowed to move an object which is useful if it's not necessary to move it? According to Tanakama, yes, you are. According to Nechemia, no, you're not allowed to. The case in which they agree is if it is l'tzarech. Okay, so that's the machlokes. Now the Amoraim, I'm going to try to explain. First of all, we're talking about kli shemalachti l'is or kli shemalachti l'heter. And second of all, when you say l'tzarech, what do you mean? So first of all, simple things first, the Machlokas Amaras between Rabbah and Rava, and they both agree that this Mishnah was discussing Kli Shemalachte Leheter. That's where this Machlokas is. In a case of Kli Shemalachte Le'iser, both Tanaim and the Mishnah will agree you're allowed to move it L'Tzarech, you're not allowed to move it Shaloi L'Tzarech. This whole Machlokas is about Shaloi L'Tzarech. We don't need to move an object, and it's Kli Shemalachte Leheter. That's the Machlokas. Ibn Nechemia says you're not allowed to move it, just like Kli Shemalachte Le'iser, and the Tanakam says you are allowed to move it. Now the problem becomes, what do we mean when we say letzarech and shaloi letzarech? So for this we have 3 levels of tzarech, 3 levels of need, 3 levels of why you would want to move an object, and they are tzarech gufay, tzarech mekaymai, and chamal etzel. What are these things? Tzarech gufay means you want to move the object to use it. It's a hammer, you want to use it to crack a nut. Tzarech mekaymai means you want to get the object out of the way. You want to sit down, the hammer's on your chair. Chamal etzel means you want to move it so that it itself will not suffer, meaning the hammer's in the sun, it'll get warped, you want to move it into the shade, or you're afraid it'll get stolen, you want to move it. Now, this much is clear. Okay, tzarech gufay is called l'tzarech. You want to use that's called l'tzarech, and about that case we said there is no machlokes Tanakama of Nechemia. Everybody agrees that you're allowed to move with the tzarech gufay. The opposite extreme, the third level, chamal etzel, that is called shaloi l'tzarech. That is definitely shaloi l'tzarech. You're definitely not allowed to move that. Possibly the machlokes between Rabbi Nechemia and the Rabbanan in the case of Kli Shemalachti L'heter applies there. Okay. The problem is tzarech mekaymai. What is that? That's a machlokes Rabbah and Rava. Tzarech mekaymai, does that count as l'tzarech? Rava says it does. Rabbah says no. Tzarech mekaymai counts as shaloi l'tzarech. Therefore, what's the case of the machlokes between Rabbi Nechemia and the Rabbanan? So, like we said, the case is a kli shemalachti l'heter by shaloi l'tzarech. According to Rava, that's referring to chamal etzel. But there is no machlokes about tzarech mekaymai. And according to Rabbah, the machlokes is by tzarech mekaymai. That's called shaloi l'tzarech. Chamal etzel, probably everybody would agree that you're not allowed to move it. It's called shaloi l'tzarech. So again, our machlokes is, what is tzarech mekaymai? Machlokes between Rabbah and Rava. According to Rabbah, tzarech mekaymai is shaloi l'tzarech. That's the case of the machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Nechemia. According to Rava, no, tzarech mekaymai is definitely mutter. The machlokes is in the case of chamal etzel. Now the Gemara is going to try to bring 3 or 4 proofs to the subject. We will then get sidetracked to be discussing whether there is a gzeira between Shabbos and Yom Tov. If something is muktzah on Shabbos, there's also a muktzah on Yom Tov, and then we'll go back to trying to bring the proofs. So the Gemara, first of all, has 2 rounds of the same proof. The proof is, what is the halacha of plates after you've eaten? You want to clear the table. That is a kli shemalachti l'heter l'tzarech mekaymai. Now, according to the way Rabbah understood Rabbi Nechemia, that's mukta. It's tzarech mekaymai shaloi l'tzarech. So how would you be able to clear the table? So the Gemara says that this question was asked twice, a few different people asking to each other, and the answer the Gemara says is that dirty plates are graf shalrei. It's disgusting, you're allowed to move it out, because even though it's mukta, you're allowed to get it out of your way. Okay, next question is Abaye addressing Rava. And it's about a grinder or a weight used in grinding wheat, which you would like to move. And we have 2 separate mishnayos, and we've seen this before in the daf yesterday, that say that these objects are muktzah. So the question is, why? You should be allowed to move with the tzarech mekaymai. These are both kli shemalachti l'isser, but according to Rava, tzarech mekaymai is called l'tzarech. And everybody should agree that even though it's a kli shemalachti l'isser, it's permitted to move. So Rava answers, this is not talking about you want to move it to tzarech mekaymai. It's talking about when you want to move it michamal etzel to protect it, and there's no machlokes. Everybody agrees that it is forbidden, and a kli shemalachti l'isser at least. The next proof is actually against both opinions, and this is concerning a wood chip which you would like to use. You want to use it to put under your pot or under the door, and it's on Yontif. On Yontif, a wood chip is kli shemalachti l'heter because you can throw it in the fire. You're allowed to add wood to the fire on Yom Tov. And yet, the Brisa says that this wood chip is muktzah, you're not allowed to use it. Now, this is l'tzarech gufay. According to everybody, kli shemachti hetel l'tzarech gufa should be permitted to use. Why is this forbidden? So the Gemara says this is forbidden because on Shabbos it's muktzah. We making zera if it's muktzah on Shabbos, it's muktzah on Yom Tov as well. Even though according to the regular calculations of the halacha, it should be permitted. It should not be muktzah. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. Why is it muktzah on Shabbos? It's kli shemachti le'iser, kli shemachti le'iser l'tzarech gufa is mutter. So Gemara says it's not kli shemachti le'iser. Wood chip is useless. A wood chip is not called a useful object on Shabbos. There's nothing you can do with it, and therefore it's muktzah machmas gufay. It's completely forbidden. It has no use, and that is muktzah according to everybody. The Gemara now takes a break from our discussion between Rabbah and Rava and discusses more deeply this concept that we make a gzeira, and if something's muktzah on Shabbos, we make it muktzah on Yom Tov as well. The Gemara is kind of contradictory mishnayos, and the Gemara is going to try to figure out how to resolve these two mishnayos. It's obviously a machlokes. The question is, who are the two opinions? So what are the two mishnayos? First of all, we have a mishnah that seems to indicate you do not make a gzeira, and you can have something which is permitted on Yom Tov and forbidden on Shabbos. And that is a mishnah which says that you're allowed to, if you have fruit spread out on the roof to dry and you see it's about to rain, so you're allowed to open the skylight and push the fruits down into the house through the skylight. You're allowed to do that on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Now the issue here is tircha. It's a lot of hard work. You shouldn't do these things on Shabbos. On Yom Tov you're allowed to. So you see clearly you have some things which is permitted on Yom Tov and not on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, well, you have a conflicting mishnah which says that there is absolutely no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos except for cooking or anything which is food or human needs related for the body. So you see clearly that the only difference is cooking, but there are no other differences. That means any other halachic differences which you'll find, we make exer from one to the other. So we have a contradiction. Do we make exer Shabbos to Yom Tov or not? So the Gemara first wants to say that it's machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. What's their machlokes? They're arguing where you have two animals that fell into a pit on Yom Tov, and it happens to be a mother and her child. You would like to take one out, so you're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov, and therefore you're allowed to get the animal out of the pit in order to shecht it. So Rabbi Eliezer says you're only allowed to take one of them out of the pit because you're only allowed to shecht one of them. You can't shecht both of them because you're only allowed to shecht. You aren't allowed to shecht the mother and its child on the same day. Therefore, you can only take out one. The first one that you take out, that's the one that you can shecht. And the other one, you just have to try to feed it at the bottom of the hole and see if you could have it survive until after Yom Tov is over, and then you can fish it out. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, there's a trick here. You could take one out and say, I'm going to shech this one. Then when it comes out, you say, wait a second, I'm not sure I want to shech this one. I think I want to shech the other one. Then you could take out the other one in order to shech that one. And then you took them both out, and then you could shech whichever one you want. So you see here that Rabbi Yeshua says in order to save your money, you're allowed to do certain things on Yom Tov. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you're not allowed to. Even if it's causing you a loss, you're not allowed to. So that might be this machlokas here. Whether you're allowed to save things in order to, that might be causing you a loss, that would be the case of the fruits which are on the roof, which you want to drop in, that the same machlokas might apply to that case. So the Gemara says this machlokas doesn't apply. It doesn't apply at all, because it could be that Rabbi Eliezer would only say that you have to leave the animal in the hole there because there's a possible solution. You could feed the animal in the bottom of the hole. You could leave it there, and you could still make it survive. The fruits from the roof you will absolutely lose, and therefore he might agree that you could bring those into the house if it's about to rain. On the other hand, it could be that even Rabbi Yeshua will agree that in the case of the fruits you would not be allowed to, because over here there's a trick you could play. You could say, I want to shech this one, no, I wanted to shech that one. So there's a trick, but as far as bringing the fruits into the house, there is no trick, and therefore he might say it's forbidden. Therefore, this machlokas has got nothing to do with it. So what then is the machlokas? Is there gzeir from Shabbos to Yom Tov or not? So Rav Papa says it's a machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Where do you see that? Well, we have a classic machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Are you allowed to carry things l'tzorech, things which you don't need now, but are called l'tzorech hayom? Are you allowed to carry those things in the Rishus Harabim on Yom Tov? According to Beis Hillel, you are allowed to carry. According to Beis Shammai, you're not allowed to carry. So, obviously, according to Beis Hillel, there is no gzeir from Shabbos to Yom Tov, but according to Beis Hillel, but according to Beis Shammai, there is. That's why you would not be allowed to carry. So the Gemara says, what does that have to do with this? That's talking about carrying. I was asking about muktzah. Is there a gzeir as far as muktzah is concerned? So the Gemara says, no, this is the machlokas that applies. Because if we let you move something which is muktzah, you're going to carry it. So if there would be a gzeira saying that you're not allowed to move it because of muktzah, there would also be such a gzeira on carrying. The only reason for the gzeira on muktzah is because it brings you to carry. Okay, the Gemara therefore concludes that discussion. Now the Gemara returns to the machlokes between Rabba and Rava. And we have three things here. We would like to know, what does Rav hold? Does he hold like Rav or like Rava? We want to know, what does Rav Mori bar Rachel hold? And then we have a statement again of Rav that we're going to try to figure out what it fits into. So first of all, the Gemara says Rav holds like Rava. Rav holds like Rava, that's tzarech mekoymai. That's the case of the machlokes by Klisha Malach Deil Heter. That's the machlokes between Rabbanan and Rabbi Nechemia. How do you see that? So Gemara says, because Rav said that if you want to move something that it shouldn't be stolen, that's called shaloi l'tzarech. Now, shouldn't be stolen is the same as chama l'tzel. You want to protect the object. So the implication is that chama l'tzel, that's called shaloi l'tzarech, but tzarech mekoymai would be called l'tzarech. That was Rav's opinion. So Gemara says, okay, but I have a contradiction to that. I have an indication that Rav holds like Rabbah. What's that? Because once Rav Kana came to Rav's house and he said, now we could move the shusa. Now we could move the beam, bring the beam for Rav Kahana to sit on. So you see that this beam, he was waiting for an opportunity to move it l'tzarech gufa, to be able to use it itself. Obviously he held that to move it l'tzarech mekoymai would be forbidden. L'tzarech mekoymai is forbidden. Whose opinion was that? That was Rabbah. So Gemara says, no. First of all, maybe he said move the beam, meaning get the beam out of the way. He wanted to move the beam away. He said, now we could move the beam out of the way so that Rav Kahana could sit down. That's moving l'tzarech mekoymai, that's permitted. Or I could tell you that he wanted to move the beam, not l'tzarech mekoymai all along, he wanted to move the beam mechama l'tzel. And now he had an opportunity to move it mechama l'tzel because he had to bring it for Rav Kahana to sit on, and therefore he really holds like Rava that tzarech mekoymai is permitted. But Chama L'Tzel was the case here, and therefore was forbidden until Rav Kahana came, and now he had to use for L'Tzarech Gufay. Okay, now the Gemara has a story where Rav Mori bar Rachel came and asked a question to Rav. The question was that he left his pillows and blankets in the sun. So is he allowed to move it or not? So Rava said, yeah, sure, you're allowed to move. Chama L'Tzel, it's called Shalei L'Tzarech, but these things are Klisha Malach Deil Heter. Klisha Malach Deil Heter, Chama L'Tzel, Klisha Malach Deil Leheter Chama L'Tzel is called Shaloi L'Tzarech, which is a machlokes between Rabbi Nechemia and the Chachamim. We go like the Chachamim, so you should be allowed to. So he said you're allowed to. So he said, but I have other ones. So he said, okay, you'll need it for your guests who might come. He said, but I have other ones even if a guest will come. So he said, I see what's going on over here. You hold like Rabbah. So you know what? The halacha for the whole world is that it's mutter. That's what I hold, and that's how I'm willing to paskin for everybody. You want to hold like Rabbah, fine. So then for you it's usher. You hold that it's that Chama L'Tzel is forbidden. Fine, gesundheit, as you wish. Meaning that Rabbah held that Chama L'Tzel was even less than Shaloi L'Tzarech. Chama L'Tzel was not the machlokes between Rabbi Nechemia and the Chachamim. Chama L'Tzel was lower than that, and in that case, even the Chachamim would agree that it's forbidden. The Gemara now has a discussion about brooms. It's a machlokes Rav and Rabbi Elazar. Rav says brooms are muktzah, and Rabbi Elazar says they are not muktzah. Now, a broom in the days of Chazal was a klisha malach le'iser, because you were not allowed to sweep the floor. It was made out of dirt. If you swept it, you would end up leveling it, and that's forbidden on Shabbos. So now the Gemara wants to know what's the case. Tzarech guvi tzarech mekoymai or chama l'tzel? If it's tzarech guvi tzarech mekoymai, what's the problem? Rav holds like Rava, tzarech guvi tzarech mekoymai in klisha malach leheter is permitted. That's called L'Tzarech. So Gemara says maybe we're discussing from Chama L'Tzel, which is Shaloi L'Tzarech. So Gemara says Chama L'Tzel, Shaloi L'Tzarech. How could Rabbi Elazar say that that's permitted? Shaloi L'Tzarech by Kli Shemalach Deil L'Isser, everybody agrees it's forbidden. So Gemara says that you have to change the text there. Rabbi Elazar didn't argue on Rav, he agreed with Rav, and he said yes, it is forbidden in Chama L'Tzel because it's a Kli Shemalach Deil L'Isser. Okay, this ends this discussion, takes us to the next discussion, which is in Mishnah. We have a new Mishnah discussing broken kalim. When do they retain functionality and therefore are not muktzah? When do they lose their function and become garbage, and now they become useless and they are muktzah? And so the Mishnah tells us that there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tana Kama as to what type of use these broken pieces of kalim need to be put to in order to be considered useful. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be a similar use to what they were used for when they were whole. According to the Tana Kama, any function at all makes them not muktzah, and the examples are as follows. If you have a large bowl that broke, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, it used to be used to hold fluids, it still has to be useful to holding some kind of thick oil or something like that. According to the Tana Kama, it's enough if it's just used as a cover for a barrel. If you have a glass shards, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to also hold some kind of oil, and according to the Tana Kama, it's enough to cover a small jug. So now the Gemara wants to narrow down what is the case of this machlokas. Did these objects break on Shabbos, or did they break before Shabbos? So the Gemara first wants to say that the entire machlokas is where they broke before Shabbos, because if it broke on Shabbos, since it started Shabbos not muktzah, it'll stay not muktzah for the entire Shabbos. The Gemara proves that it's not so. It's the other way around. If it broke before Shabbos, that's where there's a machlokas. But if it broke on Shabbos, that's where there's a machlokas, because its function is changing on Shabbos. And the machlokas says, are you allowed to change an object's function? It used to be useful for one thing, now it's useful for something else. That Rabbi Yehuda says is no good, but the Tana Kama says it is. You don't have to worry about the Isser called Neilad changing functions on Shabbos. However, if it broke before Shabbos and it had its new function on Shabbos, Rabbi Yehuda would certainly agree that that's okay, even though it has a new function. Now, the Gemara introduces the proof that this is where the machlokas actually is. It's a brisa discussing Hilchos Yom Tov, and it says you're allowed to burn kalim on Yom Tov. You're allowed to throw them in the fire. Like we said, it's not forbidden to throw things in the fire on Yom Tov, but you're only allowed to throw whole kalim. You're not allowed to throw broken pieces of kalim. Now, the Gemara says this is obviously referring to where it broke on Yom Tov, because if it broke before Yom Tov, you would not call them broken kalim, you would just call them pieces of wood, because before Yom Tov began, they were already in just a state of shards of wood. So obviously it broke on Yom Tov, and you see that it says you're not allowed to burn the broken ones, because they're muktzah, because they did not have this function when Shabbos began. So that is a proof that that cannot be the case where it is permitted according to everyone. On this subject, the Gemara has three brises with three different opinions. According to one, you're allowed to burn both kalim and broken kalim. According to one, you're not allowed to burn either of them. And according to one, you're allowed to burn whole kalim but not broken kalim. How do you work this out? So the Gemara says it's Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Nechemiah. Rabbi Nechemiah, we've seen before, holds you're not allowed to change any object's function. Therefore, you're not allowed to turn anything into firewood. You're not allowed to burn anything. Rabbi Shimon holds you're allowed to change functions on Shabbos. Before Shabbos, it doesn't matter. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to change functions, therefore you're allowed to burn whatever you want. Kalim, non-kalim, you're allowed to change the function. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to change a function, but you cannot introduce a new function. Therefore, functional kalim, you're allowed to burn, you're allowed to use them as firewood. Something broken with no function, you're not allowed to use as firewood, because that would be giving it a function it did not have before. Okay, now, on a similar subject, the Gemara has a halach here. Rav Nachman says they have bricks left over from a construction project. You're allowed to move them. They're not muktzah because they can be useful for leaning upon. However, if you arrange them and order them in a way that shows you plan to use them for another construction project, now they're muktzah because they're part of this new building and they're not used for leaning upon anymore. Now the Gemara says, what about a shard of cheres, of pottery? So it depends where you find it. Shmuel says if you find it in a chutzner, it's useful because you can use it to cover a kli. But if you find it anywhere else, in a karmelis or in a Rosh Hashanah, there won't be kalim hanging around there, and you won't use it for anything, and therefore it's useless. According to Rav Nachman, no, even in a karmelis, you sometimes find the kalim, and therefore you're allowed to use this shard because it's useful to cover a kli. But in Rosh Hashanah, there are no kalim, therefore it's useless. And according to Rava, no, even in Rosh Hashanah, it's not muktzah. Since in a chutzner it's not muktzah anywhere else. Even though there's no kalim in Rosh Hashanah, but since in a chutzner it's not muktzah because there are kalim there. Here it's not muktzah either. And the Gemara has an incident that happened over here. Rava was walking in a public square in Mechuzah, and his shoes got full of mud, and his shamish came and took a shard of pottery and cleaned it off for him. So the Rabbanan were upset. They said, "What are you doing? It's muktzah." He said, "Listen, not only don't you know halacha, but you go around telling other people off. And the yard is not muktzah, and the chaser is not muktzah here. It's also not muktzah as long as I have use for it, and I have use for it. I needed to clean my shoe." Okay, another halacha. If Yehuda's name is Shmuel, if you have a barrel which broke, so the cover is useful and the pieces are useful, and therefore it's not muktzah, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. Just you have to be careful not to smooth it out. That would be finishing it off. That would be improving it. That you can't do on Shabbos, but you can use it to put under the legs of the bed or anything like that. However, if you throw the cover, all these things into the garbage heap, so then you've already made a statement that is now useless and therefore becomes muktzah. So the Gemara says, Rav Papa asked, what do you mean? If I throw my shirt in the garbage, now it becomes muktzah? Why should that be? It's still useful. So the Gemara says, no. What happened over here was you threw it before Shabbos. Before Shabbos began, you threw it in the garbage, therefore you've indicated you're mentally disengaging from it because you mentally consider it to be garbage. Then it becomes muktzah for you because you no longer consider it functional.
Drive Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.